Um,
Can I ask you a question about legal precedent?
yeah, go for it. Yeah, ask me all the questions. People who are watching for
Um,
Villain Burns are probably more interested in that anyway.
yeah, I
As long as
don't
it's
know a huge
educational, you
amount.
can't ask me for legal advice.
No, it's not gonna be legal advice.
Okay.
I don't know a huge amount about legal precedent, but I come from a line of public defenders,
Oh
so
shit, that's so cool.
hopefully that speaks for something.
They are probably
What?
good and overworked people.
Yeah, definitely the latter, at least.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Um,
Anyway.
my question is, it, uh, setting just bad decisions
Mhm.
that set precedent aside,
Sure.
what do you think of what I guess get referred to as like weak decisions? The one that jumps to mind is like Roe v. Wade protects a right that we probably want, but maybe in a way that's not as strong as we wish it was
Hmm.
protected.
Yeah.
What do you think about that sort of decision?
So I have to think more about Roe v. Wade because essentially, like the commentary, like I've heard a lot of commentaries to the same effect, right? Essentially, like Roe v. Wade accomplishes the right goal, but the way that the ruling was that the decision was decided was on really shaky grounds. I can't remember the specifics that led to that. I just remember that came up during my class. And so, like, essentially, without looking more into that, this is my basic take, right? Um,
Yeah, if you
I'm
don't
gonna
feel
well, I'm gonna
like
try and give
confident.
like a non-Weasley answer, but like the first caveat I'll give is like with a lot of these issues, I think that there is a balancing act, but like the balancing essentially is like between achieving the goals that you want. Well, actually, I guess that. All right, hold on. Actually, there's a caveat at the fore end, right? Because this is the reason that like I kind of in one way hate impact litigation because impact litigation almost goes against like the inherent kind of design of the appellate system, which is not necessarily to try to push law into a specific direction, but rather to try and interpret the law according to what the law has said in the past, right? To maintain the consistency that the system was built on, right? And so the reason I don't love appellate law, at least, or like impact litigation in this regard, is just because it seems to kind of like it kind of plays with this idea, right? Now I think it does so justly because, or I think that it does so with like a justifiable purpose, because it can be really tough when we live in a society that doesn't offer a lot of avenues to be able to achieve civil rights, and so we'll take what we can get. But like
Unfortunately, right? Yeah.
I think in those, so like that's the first caveat, right? Is that like that's why I generally don't prefer operating in these areas because it means that we're operating not from like a moral high ground necessarily, but from kind of like a neutral position. So that's the first part, and then beyond that, then the question is like, okay, so if we're trying to achieve the goal of acquiring civil rights, like if we're already kind of disregarding the idea of trying to interpret the law consistent to how it was designed necessarily and trying to push the law into a certain direction, like if that's the goal that we've kind of assumed from the earlier discussion, then the question becomes, okay, so if we're going to push the law into a certain direction, then we probably want to make sure that it's done so on safe enough grounds that it's not going to be overturned at a later time, right? Or else that effort is going to be for nothing, and we're going to end up in the worst position later on, right? And so,
Which, yeah, is in some ways where we worry about being right now, right? Like
yeah, exactly. And so that's
the
why with
Supreme
like
Court
Roe v.
gets.
Wade, it's tough, right? Because we like if we're pushing civil rights, which isn't necessarily what the appellate system is supposed to do, but we're also doing so in a way that does not necessarily hold any like weight for like going long into the future, or not necessarily like we're doing so in a way which is not like on the strongest grounds, like like to compare that, right? Bostock v. Clayton County, that's a super strong argument, and I feel like that's going to just like really help long into the future, kind of like give a lot of arguments for like really good LGBT protections in the workplace and other areas where we have laws that are that use the language like on the basis of sex, right? um
Okay, I'm not familiar with that
yeah. So I mean,
decision.
essentially, Bostock v. Clayton County, the interpretation, because I believe it goes to, it's either Title 9 or Title 7. Someone in my chat will remind me. But essentially, that's a spicy take, maybe. Oh, you're talking about something else. Yeah. So I mean, like, essentially, in Bostock v. Clayton County, they're interpreting either Title IX or Title VII. I can't remember because I'm a little drunk right now, so whatever. To basically look at whether or not the term on the basis of sex or discrimination on the basis of sex applies to LGBT people, and especially trans people. Oh, it's Title VII. All right, thank you. And so what the court essentially does is, and they adopt the argument given by, I can't remember if they're the appellates or the appellees in this situation. They adopt the argument given that in order, like, there's no way to be able to discriminate against trans people and gay people, or otherwise LGBT people, without taking sex into account in some way, right?
So you can't do it.
Yeah, it's literally impossible. And so, for example,
like a sort of based decision.
Oh yeah, no, it's absolutely based decision, but it's a super strong argument, right? Because I mean, like, literally, like with trans people, you know, usually you'll have like obviously it's a contrary gender to what someone may be assigned as far as their sex at birth, and then with people who are like LGBT or otherwise LGBT, so like lesbian, gay, bisexual, etc., etc., etc. You know, then those are people who experience a attraction different to people conventionally belonging to that sex category, right? And so in both instances, it is literally impossible to be able to discriminate against people in those categories on those bases without taking sex into account. And this is the argument the court ends up adopting. In fact, I believe it was Kavanaugh who actually argued in its who wrote the opinion, right? Who's a obviously a Trump appointee, like, conservative judge, you know, and that says a lot. Insofar as like the credibility of that. So that's going to be a decision which is going to stand for a super long time. And people have already been trying to take that and apply that same language and argument in a lot of other areas when we're using language like protections against discrimination on the basis of sex, right? We're trying to draw people into the Discord. I'm trying, all right? I'm sorry. This is what I talk about. If people don't like what I'm talking about right now, then they probably won't like me. But yeah, so
there's always ESO.
Yeah, no, sorry. This isn't a politics server. It's all ESO. It's just ESO, I swear. I just get distracted from ESO sometimes. I swear. But like, yeah, so and so like to compare that with Roe v. Wade, right? It's just hard because like it is like the right idea that we're pushing for, but ultimately if it ends up being overturned because the argument was not good enough initially, then I don't know. It's like countervailing interests. Was it able to do some good for people while the decision stood? Well, yeah, totally. But also it means that like it probably will be overturned at some point, and then we're going to be deeper in the hole than we were before, because then we're going to have precedent standing affirmatively overturning it and saying that it's not, a affirmative right or right.
Saying not only you can't use this argument, but also
there's an argument against you.
Now you're counter argument.
Yeah, now you're in the hole, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's essentially my take on it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the question was like, what do you think about
like bad decisions or anything, even if they end up pushing like good policies? Yeah. Like the TL.
And it sounds like the answer is, really wish they didn't have to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Like the answer is like, I don't like them insofar as they'll probably be overturned in the future and they'll put us more in the hole. But I do like them in the short term because like they can achieve like positive outcomes for people immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.